a new option for developers, and the EU changes its mind. Again, this is MacVoices. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Backblaze. MacVoices listeners get a fully featured no-risk free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's MacVoices Live. It's Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time that is, wherever you are. We are on youtube.com/MacVoices TV. You should be here with us. Mark your calendars for every Tuesday because we do this every Tuesday at this time. We do follow U.S. Standard Time. So if you're somewhere out there that doesn't follow it or is in those countries east of me, and you're trying to catch up because there's always, I guess, 1 or 2 weeks each year that things are out of sync. But if you just target Eastern Time, you'll figure it out. And I got to tell you, you really should tune in early to listen to this pre-show because it's beyond description. And it just is. And if you don't tune into that, you definitely should become a MacVoices patron and get it on After Dark because there's just no entertainment like it anywhere. And that's all I can say because we try to keep at least this part a family-friendly show. Lots of stuff to talk about tonight. A few Apple things, a number of non-Apple things actually, but tech-related that you probably should know about or at least be interested in. So we'll get to those in a minute. First off, we'll go around and find out who's here. As always, no big surprise, Mr. David Ginsburg is in the top left of my screen. David, good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Chuck. It's always a fun time on a Tuesday night, and looking forward to good conversations. Hope everybody's well. The weather's been amazing today, over 70 degrees.
Wow. Okay, yeah. We had snow Sunday. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Been a weird year so far.
Yeah. Our resident gambler, Brian Flanagan Arthurs, is here. Brian, good to see you.
You too. That's too much credit, though.
Well, I don't know. We still have things to explore and find out about Brian.
Maybe After Dark.
Yeah, no question. Mark Puccio is here, this time sporting a baseball background. Mark, you want to elaborate? We always ask you to explain your backgrounds because sometimes we just plain miss it.
Yes. So when I saw the list of topics that came out, all these stories were familiar. So it reminded me of that old Yogi Berra quote. It looks like deja vu all over again. So I think our audience will understand and probably will be saying that to themselves as this discussion unfolds.
That's interesting, and it's not us beating on the same story every time, or all the time. It's though different instances of some of the things that those stories represent. So,
right. I think as most literature professors will say, there's only a couple unique stories in the world. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, etc. Well, here it's it's what we can summarize at the end. It's somebody sues Apple, and other bad behavior on the internet is repeating themselves and being added to the list of all-time great script ideas.
Yes, isn't it that something like there are only really 5 jokes that everything else stems from those jokes? I don't know.
Well, we have 9 here, so I think that you're undercounting a little bit.
Maybe so. Marty Gensius is here. Marty, good to see you. I understand you have a little bit of a bass going on.
Yeah, some weird cold that's been passed around my house. My daughter has it. My wife had COVID. She's COVID free, and my daughter and I have managed to stay COVID free. But we have this nice baritone voice that is following me around. So
it's your radio voice, Marty. Keep it, bottle it for the future.
I had a radio voice once. It was a little higher than it is now, but the raspiness is what's getting to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
In After Dark tonight, Marty will be performing Barry White's greatest hits. Speaking of greatest hits, Jeff Gammett is here. Jeff, good to have you.
It's always a treat to get to hang out with all of you. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
The real Jim Ray has joined us.
Hello, it's 62 degrees here in California, so I better move to Chicago.
Okay. Warm weather person, Jim.
I need some warm weather, so Chicago, here I come.
Mm.
You'll be sorely disappointed.
Ben Rathig is here as well, and there's a little bet going on with Ben tonight too. Ben, I don't know if you want to share that or if you just want to let it ride. But
yes, my 1-year-old cat, who is currently sitting on my computer's power cable, has already knocked over my second display twice.
What could possibly else go wrong?
Yeah, so we'll see.
Don't give him ideas. He's sitting right there.
We'll see how this goes by the end of the night. But if Ben suddenly disappears, you'll know what happened. Last but absolutely not least, Mr. Eric Bolden has joined us. And Eric, we have another bird.
Chickadee tonight.
A chickadee? Okay.
Yep. Chickadee sitting in a weeping pussy willow.
Okay.
Boy, those jokes just
Jeff,
right.
you got to touch that one.
Yeah, those jokes just right
I
themselves.
can't after the court order. But you have no idea how difficult it is right now to stay in compliance.
Anyway,
all I'm going to say is it was consensual.
And I said last but not least, but just that was almost his cue to prove me wrong. Webb Bixby joins us. Webb, it's great to have you.
Good to have you. Tonight's quilt was made up from all old neckties that I had that took out of circulation, and my wife made a quilt out of them. So,
wow. Now, okay, so I can't let that go. So, have you zoomed in a little bit? Because I don't think of neckties as being large enough to have enough fabric to do a quilt.
No, you take about 3 or 4 inches from the bottom of the tie, and she kind of made them a trapezoid type shape. So that's what you have there. So
that's impressive work.
Yeah, it's like I said, she's really, really talented. So
equally impressive is how many ties you had to donate to the project.
I got a tie guy.
Clearly.
Yeah, I think a lot of us had tie guys at one point, but that ship seems to have sailed quite a bit since the pandemic.
Not in my world.
Not in your world? Okay.
Not in my world, no.
Okay. Well, anyway, we'll get on to this. So let me throw the first thing that there's been a lot of back and forth between Apple and the EU this week. And I feel like a lot of it's been kind of talked to death. So I didn't really feel like we needed to go back and revisit it. This is new, though, today, that apparently Apple is going to allow web developers to distribute apps from their own websites. And from what I read and what I understand of it, there will still be some security measures that those developers will still have to, I guess, not pass certain certifications, but they will have to register for an account. I guess they will get the code that will allow that distribution to be secure and safe. But this is a radical departure from having things only being available in the App Store. Anybody surprised at this particular turn?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. And just like I'm not surprised with the other thing that went along with this, which was app developers being able to create their own app store just to sell their own products. My guess is that as Apple has moved forward with their plans for DMA compliance, that the EU has been telling them that no, in fact, what you are doing is not fully in compliance. And so Apple just keeps adding in the next little thing until they get the EU to say, there you go, now you've got it. And then that's where they'll stop.
Okay. Anybody agree, disagree with that?
I have a different.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I have a different take. I was surprised. It would seem to me that this would be the natural thing Apple would do first, is let everybody out there, instead of creating this artificial sense of third-party app stores, who might be more onerous to deal with than Apple, and let developers go out and sell their own products directly. And then for them looking at it, they could do a plus minus analysis and decide, do they really stand to benefit that much, or would they rather just continue to work within Apple's guidelines? So I think had they done that initially, and instead of offering any ability for sort of agglomeration, the Walmart of app stores, I think they would have really headed off a lot of some of the critical press that they've had over the past couple of weeks, Epic notwithstanding.
Ben?
Speaking of Epic, the conspiracy theory part of my brain has to wonder if this concession was made after last week's letter.
It's possible. Does it change? If it was or if it wasn't, what do you think the significance is?
Well, number one, we know by now that the EU is not playing any games with this. They will come down hard and fast if they think you're breaking the rules. Though I do have to say with this, it seems like they're giving Apple a little bit of leeway to get this fully implemented, because this isn't going to be available in 17.4. whatever. They're saying later in the spring.
That's fine. So I don't know if there was another story broke late this or if it first saw it late this afternoon on Ars Technica about some company whose name escapes me at the moment, but I can look up. Issued some information saying that they're finding that 17% of iOS apps make more than $1,000 a month. So again, that helps go into my comment that if you're only making $1,000 a month, you're probably not going to want to go through all the additional work and effort, to sell directly. You'll probably just grin and bear it and pay Apple their 15%. If you're a huge developer selling more than 1 million copies of something per year, which is where their technology, €0.50 technology download fees kick in, for the small number of huge developers, it's clearly in their economic interest to do downloading direct to the device from their own website. So I don't know why, or all the behind the scenes machinations that might leak out over time. But again, I think that what this means is, I think for most smaller developers, I think they'll stay with Apple, and the bigger developers, they can open their own app stores and still pay Apple €0.50 per download. So, it's a reasonable compromise. And we'll have to see if it develops traction and spreads worldwide, or if it just gets contained to the EU.
Marty?
Yeah, my question about this is to the group, and it's something I heard last week. I mean, Jeff talked about the concession being that now developers can create their own app stores. But what I heard was the process for doing that was quite expensive, and that most app developers don't have sort of the down payment to be able to do that. It's only like Mark said, it's only the large developers to where that's really advantageous. And so, I wonder if other people heard that, or if that's going to be the new status quo, that the the little guy doesn't really, there isn't an advantage to this. I also heard that you can opt out once, but then there are steps that you can opt back in. And once you opt back in, you can't go out again. I mean, some of that's built into this agreement, but it's changing every day, as we know.
Today's Mac Voices is supported by Backblaze. Mac Voices viewers and listeners get a fully featured, no-risk, free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Go right now and see how easy it is to protect yourself from nasty surprises. Backups are essential. Backups help protect you from all sorts of nasty surprises. Surprises like a drive going bad, or a device being stolen, or your home being flattened by a tornado. Unfortunately, that last one isn't just something I threw in. Have you been watching the news lately? That's why Backblaze is something that I rely on, because it makes backups easy and automatic. But what if you had one of those bad things happen and you need to get that data back? That's another place Backblaze shines. Just log into your account and start the recovery process, and all of your data comes flooding back down. But what if you need the data in a hurry, or have one of those multi-terabyte drives? Even at the best of speeds, it can take time. With Backblaze, you have the option of having them ship you a hard drive with all of your data intact. Just order the hard drive restore option, and all your data is shipped back to you. That means you're back up and fully operational in days, not weeks. And if you return the hard drive within 30 days, you get a full refund. Before I found Backblaze, I had a terrible experience with a different backup company. I fired them and never even thought about looking back because Backblaze is so much better and so much more reliable. That's why I want you to visit backblaze.com/MacVoices right now. Start the 10-day free trial and see just how easy it is to be protected. Backblaze.com/MacVoices. Do it now. Thanks to Backblaze for supporting Mac Voices.
I think the devil is in the fine print. And this announcement was just made a few hours ago. So, I don't think the fine print has really been discovered yet. I just now read, and I'm not sure because I just read it, that direct distribution is only allowed for apps that had 1 million downloads in the previous year. So if that's true, then there's not even a question about small, it's not available for small developers, and it's not, doesn't seem to be clear yet whether somebody can just decide they want to do this or they have to get Apple's permission.
They have to get Apple's permission.
Yeah. I think so. So, to me, all of this, what it feels like to me is Apple really, what they want is the status quo. They want everything to continue. They want the App Store to be exactly like it is now. They don't want any change. And they're trying to come up with this sort of pseudo, hey, see, we opened it up. So, don't bother us anymore, without anything ever actually changing. In other words, with virtually all app distribution still going through the App Store just as it is now. That seems to be what Apple wants. And they're just trying to, have, smoke and mirrors and, like a matador, look over here, and without anything really changing. So, the question is the EU gonna let them get away with that? I have no idea. And I guess, it's really a political question, the world over, because I'm sure other politicians are looking at this all around the world. But it's pretty clear that, Apple, they just are planning to dig in their heels and, resist at every single step of the way. That's their idea. And I think most developers are just going to be like, look, I don't want to get involved with this. Let's just we know that we can conduct business through the App Store, and so we'll just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, you want to comment?
Sure. Jim speaks the truth. Listen to this man. He knows what he's saying. Yeah, Apple has no interest in having third-party app stores of any kind for iOS, and they will do everything they can to make the options for these third-party stores to be as unpalatable as possible. So that's exactly what they're doing.
Okay, so I have a question for the group and as Jim said, this is just hours, part of this at least is hours old. But we know what Apple's take is in the App Store. And so if I flip it around, what developers have to pay from, what percentage they have to pay. What I haven't been clear on is if I take my app and move it to an app store, a secondary app store or an external app store, aren't they going to take a piece of it too? And now we have yet another option that is we're still exploring here what it means. But if I'm a developer and want to sell it directly from my website, am I going to be paying Apple their same percentage, or am I going to be paying less? Almost more importantly, though, am I going to be potentially cutting out the middleman for those third-party app stores? I haven't seen any analysis of the dollars and cents, and under the theory of you always follow the money, I want to know kind of what does this really benefit a developer? Because I can see situations where it could and would, but I also understand. But and to Jim's point, this may be a bit of a poison pill to keep developers just saying the heck with it. Or Jeff made the point. Sorry, just keep them in the App Store, doing what they've been doing, paying what they've been paying, and enjoying the benefits of being there, along with the hassles.
The other thing is this is only Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think most developers are looking at this like, who cares? I'm not selling my software only in Europe. I want to sell my software worldwide, and presumably outside of Europe is by far the bigger market. So maybe there may or may not be some benefit to software sold in Europe, but is that going to be enough that, okay, because you're going to have to sell through the App Store if you want to sell outside of Europe. So, unless your app is something like Travel Portugal, you want to sell through the world. And so that means you're going to be double effort. You're going to have to be in the App Store and, go direct or go through an App Store or whatever. So I think most developers are just looking at this. It doesn't matter. Who cares? This is dead on arrival, no matter what the terms are, because it's a world market. And look at another story that gained some traction over the last few days is what if somebody in Europe, they buy some software through an app store, and then they travel outside of Europe for more than 30 days, and now their software doesn't work. Who wants any part of this nightmare? This is designed to fail. That's the whole point of it. A year from now, there's going to be an insignificant amount of software sold through anything other than the App Store, unless the EU breaks up Apple or something. It's going to, which that won't happen in a year. They're not going to break up Apple anyway. But for whatever EU to have to do something, it's probably going to take years because Apple is going to fight everything. They're going to go to court where they can. They're going to, they're clearly have got lots of great ideas for how to make this unpalatable to developers and pointless. And, this is all just a lot of spinning of wheels and great crowds of smoke being generated with absolutely no fire.
Mark?
Yeah, I just have two comments. Number one is, for all the reasons Jim mentioned of all the headaches and problems, this is why majority of developers, if 80s, if those numbers are right, if 17% of developers, or 83% of developers making less than $1,000 a month, there's no way they're going to be able to afford to go through all these bells and whistles and jumps and hoops. This is really only for large developers of global scale, that have the millions of dollars that they could realize, oh, well, we could gain this amount and it would cost us this much to go comply with all these other things. So, but it's worth it to us because we have a lot of customers in Europe. I don't know, that may be companies like Fortnite or Spotify, but this flows into my second comment, which is that this seems to me it's sort of very much a political issue, and I don't know if it's the EU trying to police and disempower and impoverish U.S.-based technology companies like Google and Apple, or if it's just an example of regulatory capture where a lot of the time and effort of a lot of trade officials in the EU got bamboozled and seduced and sucked up by people like Spotify and Fortnite about how bad Apple is, because Apple is compliant with what they wanted to. For Jim, for people to complain that this is an ugly, ugly solution, well, that's exactly what Apple wanted it for. So there should be no surprise, that that is an ugly and difficult solution. And I think really, it kind of goes back into the point of, well, what were developers really asking for? And all the things I hear, they're completely different, than than any of this, side loading of apps or having their own payment mechanisms. So I think this is, if we can fast forward 5 years and look back, we'll just realize this is a big sound and fury amounting to nothing that just came and went after a couple of years.
Brett? Sorry, Brett. Where did that come from?
Brian.
Brian, sorry.
Yes, when I was looking at the article, something that occurred to me, I was thinking, this is just a way Apple is really trying to take that first step, kind of have control over the situation by writing the rules themselves in such a way, by understanding the DMA in place, and then putting on top of that the ability for the web downloads to take place. It's kind of Apple's MO of kind of having that control of the process top to bottom, and then by having these rules written in place on top of the law, I think it puts them into a position where if there are additional laws or additional regulations that come out, it'll almost be in refute or in conjunction with what they wrote, rather than writing it from the beginning, and something that they completely disagree with. At least something that may be written later might be something that they can live with.
I want to make sure that I get this in. Brett in the chat room says, I don't think the third-party stores break after the European app situation, break after 30 days outside the EU. They just stop updating. That's my understanding as well. So
which could break them.
So what if there's a security update that's necessary or something like that?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, technically,
that's what you get for leaving the EU.
Yeah, you like it so much there with all their rules, and stick around.
I have a follow up on what Brian was just saying. I agree. I agree with what he's saying, that Apple's trying to get ahead and write the rules themselves rather than having them written for them. But this announcement today feels a little bit like Apple is, being reactionary, and they're falling, kind of behind on, they had their thing, 17.4 came out, and they're like, here's how we're going to do it. And now all of a sudden, like, oh, we're going to add this other thing. To me, that feels like it's been made clear to him that what you announced 2-3 weeks ago ain't going to fly. So now they're reacting and like, oh, okay, we're going to tweak it. I mean, they're still trying to get ahead, but it does feel like, they're on the tail of something that's whipping them around, and who knows where this is going to wind up. I don't think, a month ago, Apple, I don't think they were planning on this side loading thing, whether it's good or bad. I don't think it's something that was in their plan, or it would be shipping now.
Yeah, and not later in the spring.
The one thing I guess that bothers me is the EU came out and said, here it is. And then they seem to be pressuring Apple kind of after the fact. I mean, Apple does what Apple does very, very well. They look at something and they say, we have to comply with it, but we're going to comply with it to our favor. Sort of like the old Irish tax, not debacle, but controversy that happened. And bringing money back into the U.S. They did nothing wrong. They did nothing illegal. They just played by the rules as they were written. And the fact that people didn't like Apple playing by the rules how they were written, well, they eventually rewrote the laws. So that's kind of what I feel like here. But it bothers me how much the EU seems to be saying this is what we want, but then they turn around. Well, that's not quite enough.
This is what we want. No, not like that.
Yeah, exactly.
First of all, Chuck, that's what legislatures are for. Is rewriting laws. Seriously. If we didn't need any changes to laws, we could just abolish all the legislatures. But secondly, I don't see that in this case. The EU, made a bunch of rules, very complicated, and who's to say what compliance with that means? I mean, there's all the time laws are passed and companies do things in response, and then there's court cases, and other people are like, hey, that's not what we meant. So that seems pretty normal. It just doesn't feel like the EU saying after the fact, and definitely, I don't think anybody in the EU imagined the system that Apple came up with when they were writing the legislation. They weren't like, oh yeah, this is what Apple's going to do. No way. So
well,
they envisioned any system, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
You think they envisioned any type of system, or just saying, Apple, you need to let third parties sell apps and end of discussion?
I'm not an expert on the EU. And I don't know if anybody is. With legislatures, who knows? They often will do things like legislation, things that violate laws of physics and things like that. So who knows what they imagine? Probably they imagine, just like something more like the Mac, like
in Windows.
In Windows, you can just or even Android. I mean, you can sideload on Android and have been able to since day one. So that's probably what they envisioned, not something I mean, if somebody really thought about it, if you came to me and said, predict what Apple will do, I might have predicted that something like what Apple did, and many of the people on this panel would, but people out, that aren't like way inside Apple followers they're not gonna and aren't super technical would never have predicted this.
It's an interesting dance to watch. I wasn't going to take us here, but I will for just a second. Going back to the question over Epic Games and the account being canceled and the account being reinstated, and everybody, including members of this panel, have interpreted that as the EU, put pressure on. Nobody is accepting Apple's statement that there were additional talks with Epic, in which Epic assured them, reassured them, like I think Apple was looking for when they made the initial public announcement that, we're looking for assurances, and Tim Sweeney just tried to blow them off. And so, we're all doing selective interpretation. I'm doing it right now because I'm choosing to say Apple, Apple asked, and somewhere behind the scenes, they got what they asked for. And so therefore, they went ahead and reinstated the account. So,
did you see John Gruber's post about that?
Hang on one second.
I think he had
Hang on one second. Just let me finish this one, and then it's yours, Jim. But I have not seen anything from Epic saying, no, we didn't have any private meetings. No, there was nothing. They were trumpeting long and loud about how, the EU is standing up for us and standing up for the little guy and beating up Apple. But they never denied what Apple came out and said. They never denied those additional meetings and additional assurances. And that to me is telling. Jim, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure what meetings. I don't think I heard anything about that. But John Gruber had a post that seems plausible to me about that particular situation. He thinks that probably Epic, just went online and submitted, a new developer, application, paid their $100, and that the system automatically granted them a developer account, just like it would if you went there and paid $100. It's all automated, and that nobody at Apple even realized what was happening until Epic posted, "Oh, hey, Apple has given us a developer account," and at that point, the executives are like, "Wait, what?" I don't know if that's what happened, but it seems very plausible for way Apple seemed to have been kind of caught out. Like, it seems very likely that Apple didn't intentionally give Epic reinstate their account, because it wasn't. I don't think it was. It was a different entity. It wasn't. They didn't reinstate the original account. There's a new account of an
Right.
Epic subsidiary, and it seems likely that they just went online and filled out the form, and there were probably a few hundred new developers every day. So there's not somebody looking at that going, "Hey, wait, is this Epic?" It was just automatically approved. And then Apple realized, "Oh, wait a minute, that shouldn't have happened." And then there was big furor, and then they're like, "Okay, we'll go ahead and let it happen." But
Yeah.
it was certainly handled poorly from a PR point of view. But
Yeah. Eric, you had a question.
Well, yeah, it occurs to me that given the poor PR disaster from last week, making a bunch of announcements that has everybody talking about this thing that Apple hadn't talked about doing before sort of distracts everyone with a new story. And they're no longer talking about the Epic thing from last week. Now they're talking about, can you go to sites and download software directly? So maybe it's just a distraction.
Interesting idea.
And they seem to be doing a lot of that lately. Like the whole original Epic, there was a bunch of stuff when the DMA came out, and then very quickly, it just so happened that the Vision Pro came out, and everybody, after like 2 or 3 days, just stop talking about the DMA, because the Vision Pro ate up all the oxygen in the room.
I have an idea. We'll be continuing to examine some of this as we go forward, because it's
forever.
There are always going to be things coming up. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.